Awesome. Thanks, Matt. So hi all. My name's Abby. I am the Director of Education for the Johns Hopkins Graduate Consulting Club, and today I'll be talking to you all about navigating LinkedIn. Next page. Okay, perfect. So the objectives for today will be just like three overarching themes. The first one is just going to be about like why we use LinkedIn and why that should be used over other social platforms when it comes to networking. And then we'll dive into how to create a LinkedIn profile, specifically one that's effective and allows you to craft your story and go a little bit deeper than what you would be able to do on a resume. And then the last thing we'll talk about is how to leverage LinkedIn so that you can grow your network, find new opportunities. If at any point you have questions, feel free to, throw up your hand, put it in the chat. If I don't see it, Matt is monitoring it for me and he can jump in as well. But I'll go ahead and get started with why we should be using LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is the largest online professional networking platform. There are over 800 million members spread across 200 different countries. And it serves as both a recruiting tool for employers and a job search tool for its members. An interesting statistic that LinkedIn provided is that there are 6 people hired through LinkedIn every minute. So that's a very impressive statistic. And a LinkedIn profile allows you to, like I said, give the opportunity to tell your story. It expands your reach versus just applying to jobs, say like on Indeed or through an actual career site. In a study done by ResumeGo last year in 2021, they did an experiment where they provided hiring managers a survey, and those hiring managers reported that job applicants who had included their LinkedIn profile on their resume or on their application, they were 71% more likely to give that person an interview. Again, it's just because those managers had the opportunity to click on the link, learn a little bit more about the candidate, and decide that they were worth giving an interview for. And then also in 2021, there was nearly a 50% increase in conversation between LinkedIn connections compared to the year prior. So I think that really just highlights that LinkedIn offers its members a space to connect with people from quite literally all around the globe. And I think with the COVID-19 pandemic and just truly living in a more globalized society and people recognizing that they can have opportunities outside their cities has really allowed people the opportunity to connect with people that they normally wouldn't in their communities for opportunities and networking purposes. So some of the main features that I think that LinkedIn has that are really important for people that they don't always use when thinking about the platform or using the platform. One is the job board, which I do recognize a lot of people do use. Yesterday, I looked, and in the United States alone, there were 7 million active job postings just in the United States. So I think, that speaks to itself. I believe I'll pull up the statistic here in a few minutes, but clearly like every major company uses LinkedIn at this point. And so this job board is just a comprehensive way for you to have access to kind of sort through those opportunities and see what's remote, what's in other cities, what's in your own city. And then when applying for jobs, a lot of times people find that they might need help with interviewing, prepping for questions, and not everyone always has access to career services like we do. In 4 or 5 years, when you all are brushing up on your interview skills for a new job, you might be like, oh, I don't remember how to answer the question, like, tell me about yourself. So something I found really interesting was that the recruiters that work for LinkedIn have actually made a very comprehensive resource site for job seekers. And it's not job seekers specifically for jobs at LinkedIn, it's just in general. So they include videos, again, like list of normal questions that you would see in an interview and how to answer them, as well as other resources. LinkedIn Learning, which is something that we as Johns Hopkins students actually have access to for free. It is a subscription service you would have to buy otherwise. Provides over 5,000 courses related to business, technology, and different creative services. So right now I'm actually taking a class on mastering Excel just because it's something I wanted to learn a little bit more about that I haven't found in my classes. So I always urge people to check that out, because something you might be missing from a course that you feel like would be important for a job one day, LinkedIn probably has it. And then also LinkedIn has tools such as industry insights. So again, in a few minutes, I'll kind of go over how to tune into those, but what you can find out is, news from the corporations, any trends they're seeing. So if you follow specific industries for your role in consulting, you're able to kind of get just a quick view of what's going on in that industry that you're working in. So the next part we'll jump into is the components of an effective LinkedIn profile. So there are 4 main things that we'll go over. And the first half is what I call the top fold, like what you would see in a newspaper, because that's really what people are seeing first when they go to your page. So that's going to be your headshot. So of course you want a quality professional photo, and then your headline and your personal statement. So you want something catchy, catchy and informative. And then later on in your page, you'll see your resume content, which is just going to be your education, your experience, skills, as well as those interests and organizations that you follow. So the first thing when you're making a LinkedIn, you want to have an appropriate profile picture, because that's probably going to be like the first impression that someone sees and has of you when they go to your page, or even when they search you. So you want to use something professional, and that can look different industry to industry. So if you're unsure of what professional would be for your industry, I would just urge you to go on LinkedIn and go look at people's profiles of, the jobs you want to do or the companies you want to work at. Because of course, someone who might want to go into consulting, a blazer or a suit would be more appropriate versus someone who might want to go do clinical field work, a lab coat or your white coat, if you're a clinician, would be a bit more appropriate. But ultimately, you want to find a photo that focuses on the upper half of your body, because it's not a very big photo, so you want your face to be clearly seen, good lighting, and of course, only you in the photo. And then avoid selfies, anything too outdated or where your face might be obstructed, whether it's wearing a hat, sunglasses, anything like that. And when I was making this presentation, I actually realized my privacy settings were turned off or turned on so that my profile picture was only viewable to people who followed me and were connected with me. So in your settings, I can help anyone figure this out. You can actually set it where either the public can see or anyone who has a LinkedIn account. Again, just so when people are going to your page, they can see everything and not just like an emoji of a link head. So the next part, which I kind of consider your second first impression, would be your headline. I included mine down here. So I put that I'm a health policy student at Hopkins, my incoming role, and what I'm passionate about. So, I mean, for anyone, I think there's a few key components that you want to have, or some keywords, what you're passionate about, and a summary of like what you're either going to do or are currently doing. So most of us are students. We may not all have employment secured right now, but if you have something that's coming up in the summer or fall, you can always put incoming X. On the left here is just a photo of, as you can see, people having put their headlines as unemployed, which that happens, especially we saw in the pandemic, or again, we're all students that are graduating. Some of us may not have a job right away, which is totally fine. But rather than having unemployed in your headline, you can have something that is tailored to the audience of which you're seeking to engage with. So passionate about helping clients solve problems. You want to keep it brief but informative, and again, just related to what you want to do. So that way, if someone's going on your profile, they say, oh, that's a really, cool headline. So this person really cares about this issue, and we work on that issue at our firm. And it could be, a entry into a conversation. Next page. So these are a few examples. The only thing I would say because all of these are really great, the only thing I would say is that I don't think anyone stands out in terms of like a value that they provide specifically that someone else couldn't have also provided. But I do think they all do a good job of being really specific in their keywords, because if I was a recruiter, or if I was just looking to network with students at, let's just say, Johns Hopkins, if I go into LinkedIn and I type in a few keywords, anyone who has that in their profile, that will pop up. So if you're missing important keywords, you may be missing out on connections with people that would be, worth your while to connect with. So all of them have, again, really good, robust headlines. I also like that 3 of the 4 of them have included any certifications or degrees that are relevant to their fields. And then the next part, which is the last part of that top fold I was talking about, is your summary. And this one can feel a little daunting because right below it is your experience. So you're sometimes like, okay, what do I have to say that's different from what I've done? And I wouldn't use your summary as much as a way to just tell about your experience, but more craft a story about like why those experiences have happened. I think it can provide really important context for that experience you've done. And I think it allows you to stand out amongst people who might have pursued similar experiences to you. You want to be concise when you are talking about your experience and qualifications, because again, they're right below that. But use this more to talk about what motivates you, what you're passionate about, and like why you're different. And again, use those keywords and phrases that you think are important to your industry, because again, those are going to pull up in those searches when people are searching for specific things on LinkedIn. So the next 2 slides are 2 examples of summaries I really like. The first one is from an individual who's a little bit more established in their career, and the second one is from someone who's a little bit younger in their career. And I'll go over what I like about both of them. So for this one, this is for the individual who's a little bit more established. I think this really highlights their origin story. So the line, what started as rallying the neighborhood kids together at 4 years old continued to over 15 years in formal leadership and team development. I think that's like a really good picture. You just imagine like a little kid kind of leading the neighborhood pack and how that's transformed them to being a leader within their industry. Something else I really liked in the next paragraph is that they stated, I believe that the strongest organizations are those in which employees feel connected to each other and to their work. I think that speaks to this person's values. So I know if I was looking to network with someone and, potentially looking for a leader in my community or my organization, seeing that's a good thing. I'm like, okay, they care about people being invested in their work, invested in their relationships with each other. That would key me in as to what type of leader they are, rather than just saying like, I help people feel connected. Like, connected to what? I think this is a really good value add. And then they go on to list some personal things they do, which is being an adjunct professor and being a part of a local women's leader group. And then again, these keywords. Sometimes if you feel like you can't add some specific keyword into your like paragraph portion, you can put it down there, just again to get that pulling into those search results. This next one, again, is a little bit younger of a candidate. So what I really liked about is their lack of, I would say, like professional years is made up by they're talking about like their career as a pianist. So they talk about taking risks and seeking out different opportunities and assessing risk from that, and how being a pianist and receiving a piano scholarship for the last 4 years, which I would be assuming from their college time, has allowed them to seek out opportunities and take risks. So if you're like me and a little bit younger in your career, don't be intimidated, feeling like, oh, I don't know how to tell, a professional manager who's been a leader for 15 years, like what I know in the professional field. Just take what you know from like your life. I'm classmates with someone who was a Division I soccer player, and she always reflects about like teamwork and the work ethic she got from being on a collegiate team, and like how she plans to incorporate that and being a team member at work. So that would be a really good example of something you could put in your about me that conveys your values, conveys you. So the next part is what I call the resume content. I'll go into depth about the education and experience, but I did want to just touch on that this also includes your skills. A place for you to list your licenses and certifications, your publications, and any accomplishments. The cool thing with LinkedIn and skills is you can go in and add what skills you feel like you have, and you can ask your network to endorse you for them. So if you have a classmate that you did a group project with, and let's say you were the main person who did all the Excel work, don't be afraid to ask them like, hey, can you endorse me for that? Like, you've seen my quality of work. because the more people that endorse you for that skill, it actually shows that. And so people can see like, oh, this person's really good at Excel, or this person's really good at public speaking. So try to gear those skills towards the jobs you want to do, because of course you don't want to have 50 skills and you happen to have like 30 people endorse you for all those skills, because then at that point you're like, what is this person really good at? Like, it's a lot. You want to hone those in maybe to 5 to 10 really specific things for your job that you're hoping to experience. But yeah, so moving on to experience, what you'll want to hit on is the company name and your job title, of course. I think the nice thing about this section is that you can highlight what you've done, but you can actually build on it more than you would a resume. So I know my resume has only about like 3 bullet points per job, but I've done more than 3 bullet points worth of work for the jobs I've had. So that's allowed me to go a little bit further into what I do. And that way, if a hiring manager does look at my resume and then looks at my LinkedIn, they can be like, oh, she also did this, she also did that. And another thing I like is that you can add some relevant media. So if you're able to share any of the work you've done in the past, you can include that. So if that was a presentation you made on video, or if it was, let's say, like a website you designed, something like that, you can actually link that on the job description. So again, someone looking at your profile can be like, oh, this is their work. Like they can see the quality of work you've performed. And then for the education, goes without saying, of course, like list your institution and your degree, but be specific. I've seen people where they're just like, I have a PhD, like a PhD in what? That's a very broad thing to have. Or specifically for Hopkins students, if you're at Bloomberg, well, if you're getting an MSPH, I think there's 9 or 10 different degree programs, which one? Include, expected graduation date and any other relevant information to your degree program. But then I think this is also a really good space to add any extracurricular activities you've done, because you don't necessarily want to put that in your experience unless you've had like job duties with it. But if it's a role that you had in a small club that you still want to share, you can put it there. And then I've also used it as a spot to either include a GPA or like your class standing, and maybe any projects that you did at school that, again, you feel like are really important to like what you've done as a student and can help you in your career, but don't have a space in the traditional experience section. So the last part of your page is going to be your interests and groups. So the interest section of LinkedIn allows members to follow companies, groups, schools, and LinkedIn influencers for industry updates and news. So these are public on your profile, so anyone in your network can go see what you've liked. So try to be intentional about what you like. And people can use those common interests as a way to, again, open the door for conversation and say, hey, I noticed you're also really interested in this organization, or I work at that organization. I'd love to connect. And then there are groups as well. So the groups are a little bit more specific because they have boards where you can actually post questions, engage with other members. Of course, some groups are private versus being public access, but essentially they're hubs on LinkedIn, and they provide a place for professionals in the same industry to share content, ask and answer questions. You can share jobs on there, and then just establish contacts and network. So being an active participant in those groups can really help with your network. And engaging with people in the field to help you hopefully, find a job, maybe find a mentor, whatever you might need. So that I did a quick LinkedIn search. I just typed in public health and Johns Hopkins, and there were so many different groups. So I think, if you just try to find a few things you're interested in, get in the group, introduce yourself, and see what happens from there. I think they're really useful, especially when they are smaller, like relatively 594 people. That's not that intimidating to post a message about yourself and say, hey, I'm looking for a job. This is a little bit about me. Is there anyone that'd be willing to speak with me? I think that's a really approachable thing to do. So moving on from like the actual designing of your LinkedIn page, I think it's really important not to just have it and then never touch it. You need to be engaging with LinkedIn, because honestly, like in this day and age, everything is about like who applying to job boards is just usually like an endless pit and you might wait 6 months before you hear anything back. Whereas if you have a connection, usually things can get moving a little bit quicker. So again, this first thing is the job board, and I more want to talk about the features of the job board because I found it really helpful. As you can see here, I just threw in a quick management consulting New York City because I figured I'd get a lot of results. And I think something that's cool is one, it promotes certain jobs. So you can see what companies might be really trying to hire for a role. So if they're paying to promote a job, I'd have to assume that like they're looking to fill that. So if it's something I'd be interested in, qualified for, it might be worth applying through LinkedIn because more likely than not, a recruiter kind of has their eye on the pulse with that role. But then you can also see what connections you have there. So if I was like, this job seems so awesome. Oh, and I know Matt there. I should reach out to Matt, like, and just tell him, hey, I saw this job. Do you know anyone in that department? Do you know who's hiring? He might not know, but he can always do some digging. I think another nice thing is that you can search by the type of experience level. So again, for me, as someone a little bit more entry level, I don't want to be sifting through jobs that require 7, 8, 9 years of experience because it's just going to be wasting my time. So you can search that way. You can see what's been posted a long time ago. You might not want to apply to something that was posted 6 months ago. It's probably not active anymore internally. And again, job type. So that's where you can get a little bit more industry specific. So for me, I might be more geared towards healthcare, whereas someone else might be more geared towards like a financial service consulting or a life sciences consulting. I think another nice feature, a few other nice features are you can quick apply. So some jobs allow you to just hit apply and it'll actually, instead of making you fill out, submit your resume and then fill out every part of your resume again, it'll just take your LinkedIn. It still will usually ask for a resume, so do prepare that, but it'll just send that through and then you're not spending 30 minutes applying to a job. You can see usually how many people have applied through LinkedIn, and then sometimes it will even tell you who the hiring recruiter is. So usually at the end of the day, recruiters don't have the final say in who's going to be hired for the job, but if you can make a connection early on and establish a relationship, it can hopefully help get you moved along the process. So the next part is adding value to your network. Obviously, networking, as I just said a few minutes ago, is really effective when it comes to finding jobs and advancing your career. And it doesn't always get you the job, but it can at least get you relationships that can hopefully get you to a job one day, or even just connect for other opportunities that aren't career related, but might be, related in terms of like nonprofit work that you do with volunteering or any side work that you might be doing. It's all about who you know. So having those connections will really help you with any other endeavor outside of a job. And so there's a few different ways. And I think all of these are more just about like how you can provide the value rather than taking the value. So sharing events, I think that one's a really good one because if, let's say you met someone at a networking event a few months ago, you connected on LinkedIn, you haven't really talked again, and you see, oh, there's another event coming up, you can always send it to them and just be like, hey, Matt, like, I know we met last week or excuse me, last month at that, and there's something coming up next week, like, hope to see you there. Just kind of putting things on their radar that you can probably connect over again. Job opportunities. So you can either share for yourself or you can share for others. So you might be in a position where someone approaches you about a job and you're like, hey, I'm not in a position to take a new job right now, but do you mind if I blast it out to my network? Because more likely than not, if you're qualified for the job, I bet you know a few people who are also qualified for the job, and can help spread opportunities to your network while helping someone fill a role. Sharing knowledge. So you could just do this like simple updates. If you see a news article that's really interesting or like, new evidence about a public health topic or a life science topic, you can just simply post it to your LinkedIn. You don't have to write anything extensive, but just saying like, hey, I've learned this today, I thought it was really cool. Because again, your network probably is interested in the same things as you. And then collaborate. So again, doesn't have to be with your specific job or not. If you're involved with any nonprofit or volunteer work and you think it's an opportunity to involve people in your community or your network, you can blast those things out and say, hey, is there anyone wanting to work on this with us or come volunteer their time with us, and get people working together on like a shared passion. And then just supporting their work. So some post about a new job or an update from their work, like it, share it, give them a shout out. Doesn't have to be anything super intensive. And then connecting people with one another. So if you meet someone that you think would be a really good connection for, from someone that you went to school with and have kept up with over the years, make the connection. Because I guarantee you, if you're likely to connect people to one another, those people will think of you the next time they meet someone interesting that they think you could benefit from. And then, oh, I went back one. Okay. So all of those things I just talked about, you can just do that through your main feed too. There's no specific science to it. Engage with people on the network. So if you see, let's say Julie here, she posts about being at Google for 7 years, just be like, that's amazing. Or if you see a cool video that Ted at Boston Consulting Group post about, like, you can share that and say, hey, we talked about or they talked about these financial things. Like, I think people in my network would really benefit from this. Like, you don't have to be like sending people direct messages necessarily and making it one-on-one. Just put it out there. If people comment, engage back with them, make it like a two-way conversation. It doesn't have to be, like I said, anything like super specific. Okay. Oh my gosh, I went back again. Okay, so the main takeaways. So one, again, LinkedIn just provides members a large platform where you can market yourselves, grow your network. So it's a really, really valuable tool with a lot of features that, again, take advantage of some of the ones that we get for free right now as students. And, if you think they're worth it afterwards, keep taking advantage of them. Second takeaway is that your LinkedIn profile may very well likely serve as your first impression for a lot of the people that you're going to be networking with. So start off strong, have a good professional headshot, have, a catchy header, and let people, get to know you a little bit through that summary without feeling like they're just reading your resume over again. And then leveraging your LinkedIn is just a great way to open doors to new opportunities and connections. Just be strategic, think about the things you're posting, the people you want to engage with and connect with. And I think it will open a lot of doors down the line for you. So that is the end of the presentation today. If anyone has any questions, please let me know. My email is on the screen if you want to follow up after. I'm also happy to help if you ever have a LinkedIn question. Like I said, just reach out to me via email. I've learned a lot of stuff this last few weeks researching about LinkedIn, about the privacy tools and the nitty-gritty features of it. And I'd be happy to help you make your LinkedIn the best it could be. Thanks, guys. All right, let me see. Okay, so Erin has a question. How do you manage striking a balance with trying to get as in-depth as possible in terms of experience, numbers, metrics, etc., without discussing things that might be too sensitive, specific for the company? And do you mean like speaking about information that might be considered confidential with the company?
Yeah, I think, for example, I would love to say like building models that did like X, Y, and Z, but I think it's always strange to think of what can be projected to the public and what is something that shouldn't, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so one, I would see what other people at your company are doing. If it's a company you're still with, asking your manager, because that's the nice thing with LinkedIn. Having a LinkedIn doesn't mean you're necessarily looking for a job. So I think you could frame it as, I'm just trying to keep my stuff current. One, asking like, what am I allowed to share? That way you have just like a defined line of like, this is off limits, this is okay to post. And I think at that point, if they're like, yeah, you couldn't talk about exactly what you were building a model for, because that's private information for the company. I think just being, generally saying like the models you were building, if there was like a specific type, I apologize, I'm not a big like coding statistics person, so I don't know all the correct verbiage, but giving a general outline of what you were doing, and you can always say like, happy to discuss further if it is topics that you can discuss on a one-on-one situation, like in an interview or in a networking scenario. But I would just define like what's okay to talk about, what's not okay, and then whatever isn't okay, just try to at least talk about what you did without revealing the content, if that makes sense. Any other questions? If not, I'll let everyone go because I know we're getting up on finals week, but I definitely appreciate everyone joining the call today. And again, please reach out to me via email if you have any questions at all. I'd be more than happy to help.